Our panel is about bridging disciplines and a holistic approach to cannabis research. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Lukas Hrt, and I'm from the Czech Republic. I'm probably the only speaker or moderator from the Czech Republic in this conference. So I would just like to say in the beginning that we are working hard in the Czech Republic on some significant reforms. We are trying to decriminalize, and I felt quite sorry that in the morning when there was speakers talking about interesting countries and what's happening in Europe, nobody mentioned actually Czech Republic, so I just felt the need to mention to you that we are also working hard and trying to change the cannabis laws for better. This panel is starting at 4:20, so that's a very appropriate time. And thank you, Alex, for choosing this time. And we all know that cannabis research doesn't fit into a single category or discipline. It touches agronomy, biochemistry, medicine, public health, and policy. And as we will learn today, even space science. So this panel brings together a uniquely diverse group of experts who are not only working across disciplines, but also across borders and institutions and mindsets. From regulatory reform in Slovenia to clinical realities to Germany, to formulation science in California and global research networks. We will be conversating about translating complex research into practical global impact. My esteemed panelists, we decided I will introduce them myself to make it a bit faster going. So on my left side is German-born but US-raised Dr. Andy Mansfeld, who brings a unique blend of clinical experience and business insight into the cannabis industry. After practicing medicine for many years in Colorado during the formative years of legalization, he developed a strong interest in how policy, education, and medical practice intersect. Now based in Berlin, he focuses on building professional infrastructure for growing European cannabis sector as a managing director of EU CannaJobs. Next to Andy is Professor Simon Greve-Henninger, the chair of agronomy at the University of Hohenheim, where she leads research on innovative cropping system, digital agriculture, and sustainable bioeconomy strategies. She's coordinating several cannabis-related research initiatives, including CannabisNet, a German-Canadian collaboration focused on medical cannabis. Next is Professor Tamara Lachtrnšek, a biochemist and cancer researcher with long career in research institutions. She served as a national director of National Institute of Biology in Slovenia for over 2 decades and led its research program on genetic toxicology and cancer biology. Since 2004, she has been a full professor and lecturer in cancer biochemistry, and she has been recently focused on cannabinoids. She also serves as a chief scientific officer of the Talman Group. TJ Martin comes from California, and he's a research chemist with over 13 years of experience in emerging scientific fields, including cannabis science and flavor innovation. As a vice president of research and development at Abstracts, he has led creation of more than 500 commercial products, co-authored peer-reviewed publications, and secured patents on breakthrough cannabis discoveries. And the last but not least is Božidar Radišić, a longtime cannabis activist, patient educator, and advocate who is active in Slovenia and all across Europe, and in recent years all across the globe. And he's been the founder of the Research Nature Institute and is widely recognized for his tireless work bridging grassroots advocacy with research and medical practice. So, let's start with the questions. Andy, you've seen the evolution of medical cannabis from both US and German perspective. What's the biggest misunderstanding among European regulators or healthcare providers about what legalization or ending prohibition could mean for clinical research and patient care?
Well, I think one of the first important points is the difference in legalization between in Europe and in the US. I think most people know, legalization in the US is state by state, and without that federal legalization, you don't really have any research money from the federal government going into research there. And in almost every country, probably in every country, the majority of research money comes from the government. So you don't really have that huge source of funding in the US. But I think the bigger thing that regulators and people in general need to realize is that legalization doesn't mean access, whether it's for research or for patient access. Just because you have a law saying you can now use this product, almost every country in Europe has medical cannabis on the books, but many countries it is impossible to access it. So you need all those other steps afterwards. You need You know, you need the regulations which allow it to happen for medical cannabis. You need the doctors knowing how to do it. You need the patients knowing how to access it. You need nurses. You need the distribution, the import. You know, you have a million different regulations and things that you need. So just because you say now it's legal doesn't mean people can get it, doesn't mean research happens. You need all the advocates and all the different levels who are pushing it, both outside the government and inside the government, to actually get access and push that research along.
Okay, thank you. I just forgot to mention that the first round of questions is like icebreaker questions to start the discussion going. So I ask my panelists to be brief, and then we will have deep dive questions with more focus. So Simon, CannabisNet is one of not too many cannabis research networks with truly international reach. Could you tell us what could be the potential benefits of such research collaborations in cannabis field?
Yes, we founded CannabisNet in 2019, and it was funded by the German Ministry of Economic Affairs, which we were really lucky to get that funding. And we set it up as a network between Germany and Canada to provide the German companies, small and medium-sized companies, with research possibilities, because at this point, most of the companies didn't have access to the plant. And we wanted to link them up with the Canadian partners in order to provide them with some deeper insight and just really link them more deeply. And what we're just really focusing on CannabisNet is that we wanted to have the agronomists talking to finally the pharmaceutical companies. So just to understand, and vice versa, to have the pharmaceuticals companies understanding what are the agronomists able to do, and build that whole research network along the whole value chain. So we have in the network, we have the agronomists, we have the lighting companies, the sensor companies, the extractors, the dryers, and finally the analytical companies. And we definitely wanted to have that interlinkage, because bridging these disciplines, we just had that strong feeling that people needed to talk, they needed to understand the capabilities of each other in order to move forward with the cannabis.
Okay, thank you. Tamara, you worked across cancer research, toxicology, and now cannabinoids. What actually drew you to cannabis science, and what makes it unique from your point of view?
Yes, cannabis, especially, sorry?
No, just hold it closer.
Yes, it's a really very, very fast developing field of science. And we found out now also different cannabinoids, not only CBD and THC, but also CBG and others, including the medical cannabis, the flower. So the flower extracts, medical floss, it's now in EU pharmacopoeia. And it's not many publications on the specific benefits of the medical cannabis versus the combination of cannabinoids in different diseases. We were focused mainly on cancer, and especially on glioblastoma, brain tumor, and also according to what we observe regarding the incidence, this cancer and many other cancers are associated with aging. So now aging is a focus of new cannabis research, because it also predisposes the humans to the different diseases, like age-associated heart attacks, like diabetes, like Alzheimer, like neurological diseases, neurodegeneration. And cancer here is a very special case, because many changes that happen during aging, also these processes happen in cancer, but in another directions. So cannabis has been found, especially CBD and CBG at the moment, what we have explored, to benefit both anti-aging and anti-cancer progression.
Okay, thank you. We will get into that a bit later. TJ, you have developed hundreds of commercial cannabis products. Where do you see the greatest disconnect between what the patient needs and what the consumers wants and what the science says?
One of the big things to call out is we see a lot of issues on the state side is access to testing on what is considered a quality marker for cannabis products. And from a testing lab perspective, what does that mean, right? Like, is this, you see this in various developed markets, like in California, Michigan, even the Canadian market, where we have brands chasing THC percentage as if that is the key biomarker for what makes a product good or bad. It's convenient, it's easy to test for, I get that. And comes from looking at the alcohol products as far as alcohol percentage leading to various forms of impairment and effects, right? But when you look at cannabis, it's not necessarily as linear, and there's more to it. And having access to this type of testing, looking more at what's quality cannabis, can also be used to drive in more consistency in products. If you're developing cannabis inhaled flower products, joints, extracts, formulated products even, having access to testing that can tell you the quality of the product and more information about it can allow brands to start developing and holding more consistent standards. But today, a lot of that access isn't there.
Okay, thank you very much. Božidar, as someone who works directly with patients, but also researchers, policymakers, medical professionals, what does the true patient-centered cannabis research look like, according to you?
It should be without so many restrictions as until now, because there should not be any obstacles in the science. And nowadays, if you want to work with cannabis, especially with THC, which is part of cannabis, are way too many obstacles, mostly bureaucratic obstacles, you know. Science should be more freely, you know, especially with cannabis, because we have lack of really clinical studies. We don't have, actually, even if it is now legalized, it will be legalized for medical use. We don't have anything to give doctors, you know, not the protocols, not the method of applications, nothing. And this is all because of those, you know, propaganda of last 70 years. And I think we should shift this paradigm completely for 180 degrees.
Okay, thank you. That's our first topic of the deep dive questions, would be education. And I noticed in the morning that everybody was speaking about education, but here we have some people who actually do the education. So, Andy, many European physicians report feeling unprepared to prescribe cannabis. What changes are needed in medical education to be better equipped doctors, so as Božidar just mentioned?
I mean, I think the biggest problem is the institutional medical education places, because as we've all experienced, you know, most doctors do not go out and seek this information on their own. And even when you try and offer it to them, most are just not interested, whether it's a time issue or due to the stigma or whatever, you know, the million different reasons might be, they're not going to access the information. So it really has to be pushed on them from the medical education system, and it needs to come, which ends up meaning it needs to come from the government. And unfortunately, both of those groups, governments and medical education systems, are not interested in it either. But, you know, we feel like we're beating our heads against a wall when we keep trying to push it. So in the end, unfortunately, somehow we're going to have to get it coming from those other sides, I think, which once again comes back to kind of the grassroots activism, but where you try and get the government to actually do this. Unfortunately, it's the toughest road, but I think it's the only way you're going to get widespread education for the medical providers.
Okay, yeah. Tamara, can I ask you, from a biomedical researcher point of view, how critical is public education to overcoming stigma and improving the research and clinical applications of cannabinoids?
Yes, as Andy said also, if you legalize, then it's still not coming to the people's mind. And this is a problem. So we need to somehow start teaching students, because these doctors now have never learned about that, because the science is developing so fast that only a couple of years ago, since then we really got explosion of publications, and the knowledge is increasing, and the doctors do their own routine and are not that interesting, because it's, as we said, this is a stigma or whatever, and we have to overcome this by starting with younger students. And this is a new generation that I see it's coming, and so we have to build on that.
And Simon, how important is to integrate cannabis topics into agricultural, pharmacological, and bioeconomy education programs? Like, what is your...
I mean, that's really important, because what we experience from the industry, that there's a strong demand for good educated people. So the industry just reached out to us and just said, hey, can you just, if you just do the research on cannabis, please integrate that in the education of the agricultural people, to integrate that through whole the line, because we just need good trained people in order to improve the whole cannabis area. And therefore, I think that that's really, and it's slowly starting right now in Germany. So there are 2 universities and one Hochschule that is doing it, just building it into their program and trying to educate the people. So I have high hopes that this is going to move further, and we definitely need that.
Okay, perfect. That's good to hear that it's actually starting, at least in Germany at the moment. TJ, from the industry and R&D perspective, what kind of education and training should be product developers and scientists come to ensure that cannabis product quality and consistency?
I mean, one of the main ones is, first, is like, I guess, a company educating your staff members and investing in your employee bases. Given cannabis is such a new product and a new market, you're not. Yes, we just talked about it, including more coursework to educate students, but you're not getting that education, at least currently, not en masse, right? And so from a company perspective, you really need to educate and invest in your staff and teach them about what they need to be considering about, and secondarily, not just educating your staff, but investing in technology and equipment for your company, like understanding where are the inconsistencies, what kind of equipment can you have on hand, and how can you really address these inconsistencies in your products and your processes to start building in better product and services for your end customers.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to a second topic, which would be international research collaboration and policy changes. And here I would start with Simon. What have been the most impactful results of your Cannabis Net in bridging German and Canadian cannabis research?
What we did was we just were able to set up funded projects between German and Canadian companies, and they're just trying to move forward with new technologies there. So just linking the German companies, and out of these, we're just, right now, a couple of these projects are still ongoing. And we just developed a couple of new products, final medical products, and it was really good to see that how both sides learned from each other, and how we just, if we just link these different knowledge bases, and if we just link the different disciplines, that there is more that we can gain from it.
Božidar, with Slovenia's recent legal changes, we all know about it because it was publicized in the ICBC newsletter. How do you see the opportunities for international patient-focused research collaboration with other European countries? And if you can tell us briefly about your fascinating new project and research collaboration that is spanning not only borders but spaces.
Yeah. I think that new law proposal is, let's say, a step forward in this, but I still think it's way too bureaucratic and way too complicated, especially for research. With research will be very much affected about this. Because you have now you have to have 2 different kind of how you say, permits from Ministry of Health and for agency for drug agency, right? And I think this is the wrong approach, and because those are actually the people who are holding back all the research for the last 20 years. I just want to add before for education, I'm not organizing now together with Faculty of Health Sciences education for doctors and nurses. And there is maybe 30, 40 nurses in one seminary and maybe 1 or 2 doctors, or even none. So this tells us a lot about this. And the project is, I always wanted to bridge, and to connect people. So the point is that nobody can do all the research. So you have to connect and to bridge and so on. So the last project we started is the space project, Marsh and Grow, where we sent now in June cannabis seeds to space, retrieve them, and then we will try to figure out if there will be any changes in genetics in the future. So we'll see what will come out.
And when the public wants to follow your work in this area, do you have any like dedicated website to it or something?
Yes, we already published the website, but we will really push a little bit more when I have the pigeon back or the sparrow back in my hand.
Yeah, that's very
many things can happen.
That's very exciting. So we'll be looking forward to more info next year. TJ, from your work with different markets, how do varying national regulations affect research and development collaboration in cannabis product development?
I mean, it's incredibly tough, to be honest with you. Like, if we even just look at the U.S. market, every state is, in essence, its own country, right? Every state can have wildly different regulations. You cannot ship from state to state. So if you are trying to research, say, collaboratively with a brand in Oregon or Washington, you're in California, it can be across the border, but to collaborate by shipping samples would be a federal crime. And even further from that, if you want to collaborate with a university, universities have world-leading experts, world-class instrumentation. However, because of the federal status, you oftentimes cannot collaborate with them without them putting their grants at risk because it is federally illegal to research. And so there are creative ways to go about this. Abstracts does have a cannabis license, does have a facility in which we can research the plant privately, and from the discoveries we make on the plant, we can then work with academic collaborators to take that research further, maybe on parts that are not THC or CBD, but maybe something else we discover in the plant, right? Maybe a new flavor and aromatic compound that may have correlations with some new mood effects or aspects of the plant that were never studied before.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to a very interesting topic, which is aging, cancer, and the therapeutical potential of cannabis. And I would start with Tamara with the question, how might cannabis compounds contribute to cancer prevention even, or supportive therapies in aging patients based on your experience and extensive research?
Well, that's a very good question. Cancer actually, especially for cancer palliative medicine, cannabis has been introduced many years ago, actually even 10 years ago, by the doctors at the Institute of Oncology. And then this was going on for up to now also. And there's a whole network of patients association, especially Breast Cancer Patients Association, that are really very active in promoting this treatment. However, the research is not going beyond that, even at the Institute of Oncology or at the university at all, because it demands for public money. And public money, as also Božidar said, in Slovenia is just based on the decision of agencies, which are all public agencies, and there's no understanding for this kind of research. So what we do for research is mostly working with the companies, international companies, investors coming to Slovenia and seeing what great facilities we have, but they are not used for that. And here in cancer, actually, there's a lot of research also for trying to prevent, not prevent cancer, but prevent cancer progression when it's already here. And there's known very well proved effects on cancer cell invasion, on cancer cell also immune activity, which is very important, and also on cancer stem cells. This is very recent research that cancer stem cells, which initiate the cancer, are most resistant to chemotherapy and irradiation, but not to cannabis, actually not to cannabinoids, CBD, CBG, together what we have published, and also now others are publishing the same thing. So the cannabinoids are dedifferentiating cancer stem cells into irregular cancer cells that are killed by the chemotherapy and irradiation. And by these cancer stem cells are good targets. It's excellent research, which has been financed by the company, actually Israeli-Australian company. And when I asked for the money for clinical trials or pilot clinical trials, that was just too much for them. And so we are here with results. And translational medicine is something that we have to all push forward to get the results from the lab, from the bench to the bed of the patient. And that's very critical.
Okay, thank you. That's very important to say. I will ask Božidar now because he's also working with cancer patients, but he's working with them personally and also been treating many patients with various cancers. So among the population or patient population you work with, what other conditions do they often seek to treat with cannabis apart from cancer? Because there is many more, I assume.
Actually, in the last 15 years, when I dealing with this, with actually any autoimmune diseases, which is not surprising if you know how the endocannabinoid system works. And this is endocannabinoid system is actually the thing why the single molecule cannot have big effect on the endocannabinoid system, because we have like 7 endocannabinoids and 2 different kind of receptors. And in this, you know, traditional pharma mind, it must be 1 molecule for 1 disease, but it doesn't work that way. It was proved many times with cancer. We have many testimonials, especially with brain cancer and especially kid brain cancer, very good results. Nobody knows why. Also with, I don't know, lupus, with arthritis, with all those actually autoimmune diseases. So.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Andy, in your medical opinion, how much promise does cannabis hold for elderly patients? And do you have any personal experience with cancer patients during your work as a doctor?
I think for elderly patients, it has a lot of promise because, first of all, elderly patients tend to be on a lot of medications in general, and the more medications you're on, the more interactions you have and side effects you have. So, especially with pain medications and other psychoactive medications, if you can get patients off of some of those and get them onto a cannabis regimen, generally a lot of them do much better. So I think there's a lot of promise there for that in particular, but of course for other potential diseases also. What was the second part of the question? Sorry.
Your experience with cancer as a medical doctor.
Oh.
And cannabis, of course.
Yeah, I mean, when I was still practicing in Colorado, it was mainly in the areas of pain and nausea. You know, it's relatively new that you're seeing these studies where you're looking at using cannabis to actually stop the progression. But certainly, you know, as pain and nausea were 2 of the original indications for it, and it is very effective for both of those, no doubt.
Yeah, thank you. Simon, can cannabis cultivation and product design be better optimized for the needs of aging population?
Yes, definitely, because I think what we need there in the long term future is we just need alternative products in terms in comparison to the flowers. So we need different application forms, and I guess that is the way that where the cultivation can have a look on what kind of different compounds does the plant have, what kind of compounds are useful, but we always need the linkage to the final pharmaceutical companies, and we need the clinical studies for that. But I guess it's really important to understand what are we doing to the basic, to the plant, what kind of genetic are we choosing? Because that is finally determining what kind of product you can generate out of that and what kind of compounds it has and what kind of possible treatment this offers. And I guess that's really important to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you. And just to the next topic, to innovations in product developments. TJ, how do you tackle the scientific and technical challenges of producing consistent, targeted cannabis products, especially when dealing with patients and people who have bad health?
Well, when trying to create a consistent cannabis product, one of the things you have to look at is where are some of these inconsistencies coming from and what product format you're looking at. If you're looking at, say, an inhalable product, which is the most common consumption format, how do you make that more consistent, right? So most markets you have a more advanced extracts like a pure THC distillate, which is highly standardized for many markets, but what is not tends to be the terpene fraction and the other aromatic compounds. And so if you work to create a very mood-specific product, or maybe you're trying to induce sleep, or maybe trying to give them the exact same experience of a strain that works for the various medical effects they're looking for, you can recreate that from a natural format with terpenes. It doesn't have to be just that specific cannabis plant extract, which is widely variable, right? Another aspect is really diving into it when you're looking at, say, beverages, gummy products, chocolates. One of the challenges is delivery systems. Are you just putting your cannabinoid in there and hoping it's a homogeneous product? That's a very bad way to approach things, but it is the reality in new markets, right? You're not taking advantage of advanced delivery systems, and these delivery systems can help really reduce the dose needed, but to get the effect that a consumer is looking for, while giving it in a consistent experience and even faster acting. If someone's taking cannabis to help with sleep, they're not looking to consume a product, wait 2 hours, go, now I'm tired. They want that effect within the next 5 to 10 minutes. And so you can have advanced delivery systems that do that today. If you're creating a beverage, you need a consistent dosing, right? When someone buys that beverage, you're expecting that 5 to 10 milligrams on a bottle. But if you don't have a proper emulsion system or encapsulation, what you can see is the can liner itself will start scalping or absorbing the THC. So a consumer may buy a beverage expecting 5 milligrams, maybe relying on that for their needs, and in reality, they're getting maybe 2-3 milligrams, which is a huge problem. But you can solve this by taking advantage of delivery systems that are on market and other consistent products.
Okay, thank you. And so from the other side, Božidar, from your laboratory testing experience, you come across hundreds and thousands of samples of homemade cannabis preparations that the patients are growing themselves the cannabis, and they actually make the preparations themselves as well. How to persuade these self-medication patients to actually transit to the professional medical setting? And does it even make sense to you from your experience?
I think this should be done by professionals and by doctors, what we are actually doing. But let me answer other way. I think many of professionals on the wrong path, and we should figure out the method how to measure your endocannabinoids, because I think this is the key, and your endocannabinoid system, and then to adjust the intake of cannabinoids. This is our next goal, how to develop this method, because through my work, I saw that not always the same combination of cannabinoids are working for the same disease or issue. So there must be something else, and I think we should focus more on this way if you want to have really therapeutic success.
So you mean like highly personalized medicine?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Tamara, how can moving beyond the traditional THC-CBD distinction can help us to move forward with the research and then the application in the medicine? Because you mentioned you worked also with CBG.
Yes, of course. THC, CBD were tried. Experiments with these two cannabinoids were the first in the field, but then again new cannabinoids were discovered, and now the combinations were also tested with different. Of course, you, as mentioned already, you have about many variants, like 100 cannabinoids with all the derivatives. And then these have different receptors again, and there's a combination of these effects of these cannabinoids and receptors to choose or to tackle the right pathway, biochemical pathway that could be effective in a certain pathology. And all this is complicated, but the whole thing should go through the same steps as for other drugs in pharmaceutical industry. Bioavailability that was mentioned, the effects, personalized, of course, approach based on the pharmacokinetics, based on the genetic of the patients. And this, of course, is expensive. And there is there are few companies that go into this way, but it's not that easy that somebody, even patients, would able to cure themselves. This is an illusion. I mean, they can do it, but it's more or less a placebo if they do it, or it may be lucky. But the right approach is really very scientific, very actually very development and of the methodology is the same as pharmaceutical companies for different drugs. And this takes time, and this takes company and money. So who is going to invest into this? This is a big money.
It's a little bit like a vicious circle, because when you get to the clinical trials, you need the money, the companies, they don't want to pay for it
exactly.
because there is no real profit or not such a big profit.
Should be public money. Public money should go for that, but before that we have to convince the politicians, we have to convince the government and all these bureaucrats to understand.
And that's what you do, so thank you for that. I think we are already running out of time, so we have 4 minutes, so I would like to have some space for questions.
Let's hear it for Lucas and the rest of the panel. You were very excited. Here comes Michael Knoot.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Klumpers from Verdian Science. Thank you for this interesting panel. I actually want to bring up an approach that's different from what you are mentioning, because there are so many compounds, there are so many combinations, there are so many combinations possible with different dosages. So this is actually an impossible task. It's just throwing at the wall and see what sticks. So the approach that we have been taking in our research in Leiden is actually a little bit different. So it wants to achieve, I think, the same thing what you propose to be doing, but then from the, I don't want to call it more simplistic, but from a different angle. So what we are doing is also not really entirely possible, but you need to start somewhere. It's a phenotyping study. So we are including right now 200 neuropathic pain patients, only giving them THC, and well, probably everybody knows here that if you give cannabis to a pain patient, it will help in half of the people, it will not help in the other half of the people. Why is that? We don't know. So then we can start experimenting with other combinations and so on, but we want to actually understand why does it work in some and why not? So we're measuring a lot of things like the endocannabinoid genetics, but also the type of pain, the experience of the pain, the diagnosis, et cetera, to do some phenotyping studies. So I thought I'll just share that with you. It's a bit of a different approach, but I think that might be maybe a good starting point, and I hope that many of you will also continue studying that and to understand what are we actually looking at with THC, because nobody knows.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, that was really more of a statement than a question, but it was awesome. But it was awesome. Let's hear it. That was a great info dump, as the kids say. There was a lot going on. Is there any more questions? Well, all right, let's hear it for Lucas and Andy and Professor Dr. Simone and Professor Dr. Tamara and DJ and everybody. And we'll move on to the next panel.
Wow.
This is the International Cannabis Business Conference, Berlin 2025. Woo-hoo. One more panel today, and then naps and food, and then the VIP party.